The winter air had that particular bite to it, the kind that makes your cheeks flush red and your breath come out in small clouds that disappear almost as quickly as they form. It was the 23rd of December, and the small town of Maplewood had already surrendered itself completely to the spirit of the season. Every lamppost wore a wreath of fresh pine, and the scent of cinnamon and wood smoke drifted through the streets like an invisible blanket, wrapping around everyone who walked through the town square. I remember that evening so clearly, even now, years later. The cold had settled deep into my bones during the walk from the bus station, and my fingers were numb inside my worn leather gloves. I had been away for 7 years, building a life in the city that felt important at the time, but now seemed hollow and distant. The decision to come home for Christmas had been impulsive, made on a gray Tuesday afternoon when the office felt more like a prison than a workplace, and the thought of spending another holiday alone in my apartment became unbearable. The town looked smaller than I remembered, but somehow more vivid, more real. The old bakery on Main Street still had its crooked sign, and through the frosted windows I could see the warm glow of the ovens and the silhouettes of people moving inside. The smell of fresh bread mixed with the pine and cinnamon, creating a scent so powerful it almost brought tears to my eyes. This was the smell of home, the smell of every Christmas morning from my childhood, when my mother would wake up early to bake cinnamon rolls, and my father would make hot chocolate on the stove, the kind that was so thick and rich it coated your tongue. My childhood home was just 3 blocks from the square, a modest 2-story house with blue shutters and a porch that wrapped around the front. As I approached, I could see that someone had strung lights along the railing, white ones that twinkled softly in the gathering darkness. My heart began to beat faster, a mixture of anticipation and fear. Would they be happy to see me? Would they understand why I had stayed away so long, why my visits had become shorter and less frequent until they stopped altogether? I stood at the bottom of the porch steps for a long moment, my suitcase heavy in my hand, watching the warm light spilling from the windows. I could hear voices inside, laughter, the clatter of dishes. The sound was so familiar it hurt, a physical ache in my chest that made it hard to breathe. How many times had I heard those same sounds as a child, running up these same steps after playing in the snow, my clothes damp and my nose running, eager to get inside where it was warm and safe. Before I could knock, the door swung open, and there was my sister Emma, older now, with lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, but with the same bright smile that could light up a room. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Then she let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around me so hard we nearly tumbled down the steps. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, her perfume mixing with the scent of the cookies she must have been baking. Her hair was longer than I remembered, pulled back in a loose ponytail, and when she finally pulled away to look at me, I could see tears streaming down her face. She was laughing and crying at the same time, her hands gripping my shoulders as if to make sure I was real. Mom appeared in the doorway behind her, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and when she saw me, the towel fell to the floor. She brought both hands to her mouth, and I watched as her eyes filled with tears. She looked older, more fragile somehow, her hair more gray than brown now, but her eyes were the same warm hazel I had known all my life. She moved slowly down the steps, as if afraid I might disappear if she moved too quickly, and when she reached me, she cupped my face in her hands. Her palms were warm and slightly damp from washing dishes, and they smelled like lemon soap. We all cried there on the porch, holding each other in the cold December air, while the Christmas lights twinkled around us, and the smell of dinner cooking inside drifted out through the open door. Neighbors walking by smiled and waved, and old Mrs. Henderson from next door called out a cheerful greeting, her voice cracking with emotion, because she had known me since I was born, and had probably heard my mother worry about me more times than I could count. Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered it, and yet somehow different. The same furniture, the same pictures on the walls, but everything seemed smaller, more worn. The couch where I used to read for hours had a new throw blanket draped over the back, hiding what I suspected were threadbare spots. The coffee table still had the ring stain from where I had once left a hot mug sitting too long, despite my mother's warnings. The Christmas tree stood in its usual corner by the window, decorated with the same ornaments we collected over the years, each one holding a memory. There was a clay angel I had made in 2nd grade, lopsided and painted in garish colors that had seemed beautiful to my 7-year-old eyes. There was a delicate glass snowflake my grandmother had given us a year before she died, catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the wall. There was the wooden nutcracker my father had bought at a craft fair, back when he was still healthy, back when Christmas meant the 4 of us together, complete. The absence of my father hung in the air like smoke, invisible but impossible to ignore. He had passed away 3 years ago, and I had come home for the funeral, staying only 2 days before rushing back to the city, unable to face the grief, unable to watch my mother's pain. It was one of my greatest regrets, one of the reasons I had stayed away. The guilt had built up like snow on a roof, heavy and dangerous, until I couldn't bear the weight of it anymore. Emma's husband Michael was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove, and their 2 children, Sophie and Jack, were playing on the floor with a set of wooden blocks. Sophie was 6 now, with Emma's dark curls and serious expression, and Jack was 4, all energy and mischief. They looked up at me with curious eyes, not quite sure who the stranger was that had made their mother and grandmother cry. Emma knelt down beside them and said softly, "This is your Uncle David, the one I've told you about." Sophie studied me carefully, then smiled shyly and offered me one of her blocks. It was a simple gesture, but it broke something open inside me, and I had to blink back fresh tears as I took the block and thanked her. Dinner that night was a chaotic, joyful affair. The dining room table was too small for all of us, so we squeezed in close, elbows bumping, passing dishes back and forth in a carefully choreographed dance we all somehow remembered. Mom had made her famous pot roast, the meat so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork, swimming in rich gravy with carrots and potatoes that had soaked up all the flavors. There was fresh bread, still warm from the oven, with butter that melted into golden pools. There was a salad with cranberries and walnuts, and green beans with almonds, and for dessert, apple pie with ice cream that dripped down the sides as it melted. We talked and laughed, catching up on 7 years of life in a few short hours. Emma told me about her job at the elementary school, teaching 3rd grade, and how Sophie would be in her class next year. Michael talked about his carpentry business, how it had grown slowly but steadily, and how he was training a young apprentice who reminded him of himself at that age. Mom shared news about the neighbors who had married, who had moved away, who had passed on. Each story was a thread, weaving me back into the fabric of this place I had left behind. But underneath the laughter and the stories, there was a current of something else, something unspoken. I could see it in the way Mom's smile would falter sometimes, in the way Emma would glance at me when she thought I wasn't looking. They were happy I was home, but they were also hurt. 7 years was a long time. 7 years of missed birthdays and holidays, of phone calls that grew shorter and less frequent, of promises to visit that were never kept. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and put away, after the children were tucked into bed in Emma's old room, the 3 of us sat in the living room with mugs of hot tea. The Christmas tree lights were the only illumination, casting soft shadows that danced on the walls. Outside, it had started to snow, fat flakes drifting past the windows like feathers falling from the sky. Mom was the one who finally broke the silence. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as she asked why I'd really come home. Not the surface reason, not the easy answer, but the truth. I held my mug tightly, feeling the heat seep into my palms, and tried to find the words. I told them about the emptiness I had been feeling, about how success in the city had turned out to be hollow, about how I would wake up in the middle of the night in my expensive apartment and feel completely alone. I told them about the day I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed, really laughed, the way we had laughed at dinner tonight. I told them about the guilt that had been eating away at me, about how I had run away after Dad died, because I couldn't face the pain, and how that running had turned into years of absence. My voice cracked as I spoke, and the tears I had been holding back finally spilled over. I told them I was sorry, so sorry, for all the time I had wasted, for all the moments I had missed. I told them I didn't expect them to forgive me, but I needed them to know that I regretted every day I had stayed away. Emma was crying too, and she moved from her chair to sit beside me on the couch, taking my hand in hers. She said that she had been angry, yes, and hurt, but that she had never stopped loving me, Never stopped hoping I would come home. Mom reached over and touched my cheek, her fingers gentle, and said that a mother's love doesn't have conditions, doesn't have limits. She said she had prayed every night that I would find my way back, and here I was, and that was all that mattered. We sat together for a long time, holding hands, watching the snow fall outside the window. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking the passage of time, and somewhere in the distance I could hear church bells ringing, calling people to the midnight service. Mom suggested we go, and though I hadn't been to church in years, I found myself nodding, wanting to be part of this tradition again, wanting to feel connected to something larger than myself. We bundled up in coats and scarves, and Michael stayed behind with the sleeping children. The walk to the church was magical, the snow falling steadily now, covering everything in a blanket of white that muffled sound and made the world feel hushed and sacred. Our footsteps crunched softly, and our breath came out in white puffs that hung in the air for a moment before dissipating. The street lights created golden circles on the snow-covered sidewalk, and in the windows of the houses we passed, I could see Christmas trees glowing. Families gathered together, the warm scenes of domestic life that I had been missing without even realizing it. The church was the same red brick building I remembered from childhood, with its tall white steeple and arched windows. Light spilled out from inside, warm and inviting, and I could hear the sound of the organ playing softly, a familiar hymn that stirred something deep in my memory. As we climbed the steps, people greeted us, faces I recognized even though they were older now, marked by time and experience. Mrs. Patterson, who had taught my Sunday school class, hugged me tightly and told me how good it was to see me. Mr. Chun, who ran the hardware store, shook my hand firmly and said he had heard I was doing well in the city, and I didn't have a heart to tell him that well was a relative term. Inside, the church smelled like pine and candle wax and old wood, a scent that was so deeply embedded in my childhood that it immediately transported me back to countless Sunday mornings, sitting in the pew between my parents, swinging my legs because they didn't quite reach the floor yet, trying to stay still and quiet while the service went on around me. The pews were filling up quickly, families settling in, children fidgeting in their nice clothes, teenagers texting on their phones until their parents gave them stern looks. We found seats near the middle, sliding into a pew that creaked softly under our weight. The wood was smooth and worn, polished by decades of use, and it felt solid and real under my hands. I looked around, taking in the familiar details. The stained glass windows, dark now, but I knew that in daylight they showed scenes from the Bible in brilliant blues and reds and golds. The altar at the front, decorated with poinsettias and white candles. The cross hanging above it, simple and unadorned. The choir loft, where I could see people in robes gathering, shuffling sheet music, clearing their throats. The service began with the lighting of the candles, a tradition I had forgotten about. The lights in the church were dimmed, and ushers moved down the aisles with long tapers, lighting the candles that each person held. The flame passed from person to person, a chain of light spreading through the darkness, until the entire church glowed with the soft, flickering light of hundreds of candles. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and I felt something shift inside me, some hard knot of tension beginning to loosen. The pastor, a young woman I didn't recognize, spoke about coming home, about the journey we all take away from ourselves and the courage it takes to return. Her words seemed aimed directly at me, and I wonder if Mom had said something to her. But when I glanced at my mother, she was simply listening, her face peaceful in the candlelight. Maybe it was just coincidence, or maybe it was something more, some kind of grace that brings us the message we need exactly when we need it. The choir sang, their voices rising and falling in harmonies that seemed to fill every corner of the church, seeping into the walls and floor and the very air we breathed. They sang the old hymns, the ones I knew by heart even though I hadn't sung them in years, and I found my lips moving silently along with the words. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. The simplicity of it, the pure beauty of those familiar words and melodies brought tears to my eyes once again. Then the pastor announced that we would close the service with a carol sing, inviting everyone to call out their favorite Christmas song. Hands shot up around the church, and people shouted out their requests. Joy to the world. Hark the herald angels sing. O come all, ye faithful, The organist played each one, and we all sang together, our voices blending and rising, filling the space with sound and joy and something that felt like hope. I don't know who suggested it, but someone called out for O Holy Night, and a hush fell over the congregation. It was my father's favorite carol, the one he would request every year, the one he would sing in his deep, slightly off-key voice while Mom laughed and told him to leave the singing to the choir. The organist began to play. Those opening notes, they're so distinctive, so powerful, and for a moment, no one sang. We all just listened, remembering, feeling the weight of absence and loss and love, all mixed together. Then, slowly, voices began to join in. O holy night! The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. More voices added to the chorus, growing stronger, more confident. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. I opened my mouth and found that I was singing too, my voice rough and uncertain at first, then growing stronger as the familiar words came back to me. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. I felt Emma's hand slip into mine, squeezing tightly, and on my other side, Mom was singing too, her voice wavering but clear. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices. We were all singing now, every person in that church, our voices rising together in a sound so powerful it seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. O night divine, O night when Christ was born, O night divine, O night divine. The second verse began, and I realized I was crying, tears streaming down my face, but I kept singing. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Around me, I could see that I wasn't alone. There were tears on Emma's cheeks, glistening in the candlelight. Mom's eyes were closed, her face tilted upward, and tears were running down into the collar of her coat. Throughout the church, people were crying and singing at the same time, this strange and beautiful combination of sorrow and joy that somehow made perfect sense. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. The words took on new meaning as I sang them, thinking about the chains I had built for myself, the prison of guilt and regret and fear that had kept me away from the people I loved. Sweet hymns of joy and grateful chorus raise we. Let all within us praise his holy name. I thought about my father, about how he would have loved this moment, how he would have been singing louder than anyone, his voice booming out, unashamed and full of joy. The final chorus approached, and the organist pulled out all the stops, the music swelling to fill every corner of the church. Christ is the Lord. Oh, praise his name forever. We were all singing at the top of our lungs now, holding nothing back, pouring everything we had into these words, this moment. His power and glory evermore proclaim. The sound was overwhelming, a wall of voices and emotion that seemed to lift the roof off the church and send our songs spiraling up into the snowy night sky. His power and glory evermore proclaim. When the last note faded away, there was a moment of absolute silence. No one moved. No one spoke. We all just stood there, holding our candles, tears on our faces, connected by something invisible but undeniable. Then, slowly, people began to embrace, turn to their neighbors, to their families, holding each other close. The silence gave way to soft murmurs, to whispered words of comfort and love, to the sound of people crying and laughing at the same time. Emma threw her arms around me, and I held her tight, feeling her shake with sobs. I'm so glad you're home, she whispered into my shoulder. I'm so glad you came back. Mom joined our embrace, and the three of us stood there in the middle of the church, holding each other while people moved around us, while the candles flickered and the snow continued to fall outside. When we finally pulled apart, I looked around and saw the same scene repeated throughout the church. Families holding each other, friends embracing, strangers offering tissues and gentle pats on the back. Old Mr. Morrison, who had lost his wife earlier that year, was being hugged by what seemed like half the congregation. The teenage girl who sat in front of us was crying on her mother's shoulder, and her mother was stroking her hair and whispering something I couldn't hear. Even the pastor was wiping her eyes, smiling through her tears. We made our way slowly out of the church, stopping every few steps to talk to someone. to accept a hug, to exchange Christmas wishes. The snow had stopped falling and the sky had cleared, revealing a blanket of stars so bright and numerous it took my breath away. In the city, you could never see stars like this. The light pollution washed them out, but here, they blazed against the black sky like diamonds scattered on velvet. The walk home was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that comes when words aren't necessary because everything important has already been said. Our footsteps crunched in the fresh snow, and our shadows stretched long in the streetlight glow. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and from one of the houses we passed, I could hear laughter and music, the sound of a party still going strong. When we reached home, Michael was waiting up, sitting in the living room with a book, though I suspected he hadn't been reading much. He looked up when we came in, and whatever he saw in our faces made him smile. "Good service?" he asked, and Emma just nodded, going in and curling up beside him on the couch. Mom went to make hot chocolate, insisting that it was tradition, that we always had hot chocolate on Christmas Eve, and I followed her into the kitchen, wanting to help, wanting to be part of these small domestic rituals that I had been missing. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, pulling out the cocoa powder and the sugar, the milk, and the vanilla extract. She heated the milk slowly on the stove, stirring constantly, adding the other ingredients in precise amounts that she had memorized long ago. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and sweet and comforting, and I leaned against the counter, watching her, memorizing every detail of this moment. She asked me about my plans, whether I was going back to the city after Christmas, and I realized I didn't know. The job that had seemed so important a week ago now felt meaningless. The apartment that I had been so proud of now seemed like just a place to sleep, not a home. I told her I wasn't sure, that I needed to think about it, and she nodded, not pushing, just accepting. "What would you do if you stayed?" She asked, and I thought about it. I had skills, experience, connections. I could probably find work here, or maybe start something of my own. The town was small, but it was growing, and there were opportunities if you knew where to look. But more than that, there were people here who loved me, who wanted me around, who would welcome me back into their lives without hesitation. I told her I didn't know, but that I was starting to think that maybe success wasn't about how much money you made or how impressive your job title was. Maybe it was about being surrounded by people who knew you, really knew you, and loved you anyway. Maybe it was about being part of a community, about having roots, about belonging somewhere. She smiled at that, a soft, knowing smile, and said that she had always hoped I would figure it out eventually. She poured the hot chocolate into mugs, topping each one with a generous dollop of whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon, and we carried them into the living room where Emma and Michael were sitting close together, talking in low voices. We sat around a Christmas tree, sipping our hot chocolate, and Emma suggested we share our favorite Christmas memories. Michael went first, talking about the year his father had dressed up as Santa Claus and gotten stuck in the chimney, or at least pretended to, making all the kids laugh until their sides hurt. Emma talked about the Christmas when she was 8 and had gotten the bicycle she had been begging for all year, how she had ridden it around the living room because it was too cold to go outside, nearly knocking over a tree in her excitement. Mom shared a memory from when she was a little girl about how her grandmother would make peppermint bark every Christmas, and how the whole house would smell like mint and chocolate for days. She got a faraway look in her eyes as she talked, and I realized how many layers of memory and tradition were wrapped up in this holiday, how many generations of love and loss and joy were contained in these simple rituals we performed year after year. When it was my turn, I found myself talking about a Christmas I hadn't thought about in years. I was maybe 10 years old, and there had been a huge snowstorm on Christmas Eve, so bad that the power had gone out. We had lit candles all over the house, and Dad had built a fire in the fireplace, and we had all huddled together in the living room, telling stories and singing songs. Mom had made popcorn on the fire, and we had strung it together to make garlands for the tree. It had been one of the best Christmases of my childhood, not because of the presents, but because we had been together, completely present with each other, with no distractions, no television or computers or phones, just us and the firelight and the snow falling outside. As I talked, I realized that was what I had been missing all these years. Not the town, not the house, but that feeling of connection, of being fully present with the people you love. In the city, I had been so busy, so focused on the next goal, the next achievement, that I had forgotten how to just be. I had forgotten how to sit still and listen, how to look someone in the eye and really see them, how to let myself be vulnerable and open and real. The clock struck 2 a.m, and we all realized how late it had gotten. Emma and Michael headed upstairs to check on the kids, and Mom kissed my forehead and told me she was glad I was home, her voice thick with emotion. I sat alone in the living room for a while after everyone had gone to bed, looking at the Christmas tree, at the ornaments that held so many memories, at the lights that twinkled softly in the darkness. I thought about the song we had sung in church, about how it had broken something open inside me, releasing years of pent-up emotion and grief and longing. I thought about how we had all cried together, strangers and friends and family, united in that moment by something bigger than ourselves. I thought about how it felt to hold my sister and my mother, to feel their love surrounding me, accepting me, forgiving me. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the sun reflecting off the snow with a brilliance that was almost blinding. I woke to the sound of children's laughter, Sophie and Jack running down the stairs, their feet thundering on the old wood, their voices high and excited. I got up and pulled on my robe, following the sounds to the living room where everyone was already gathering. The children were beside themselves with excitement, bouncing on their toes, their eyes wide as they looked at the presents under the tree. Mom was in her chair, wrapped in a blanket, her hair still messy from sleep, but her face glowing with happiness. Emma and Michael sat on the couch, holding hands, watching their children with the kind of love that makes your chest ache. I settled into Dad's old chair, and for a moment I felt his presence so strongly it was as if he was sitting right beside me. We took turns opening presents, the children going first, tearing into the wrapping paper with abandon, squealing with delight at each new toy or book or game. Sophie got a dollhouse that Michael had built himself, every detail perfect, every tiny piece of furniture crafted with love and care. Jack got a wooden train set, and he immediately began setting up the tracks, his little hands working with surprising dexterity. Emma gave me a photo album she had put together, filled with pictures from our childhood, from family vacations and birthday parties, and ordinary days that had become extraordinary in memory. I flipped through the pages slowly, seeing my younger self smiling back at me, seeing my father healthy and strong, seeing all of us together, whole and happy. The last page had a recent photo, one Emma must have taken last night when I wasn't looking, of Mom and me sitting on the couch, our heads close together, both of us smiling. Underneath, she had written in her neat handwriting, "Welcome home." Mom gave me a box that was wrapped in paper that looked old, the tape yellowed with age. When I opened it, I found Dad's watch inside, the one he had worn every day, the one that had been his father's before him. It was a simple watch, nothing fancy, but it was heavy with meaning, with history, with love passed down through generations. Mom said that Dad had wanted me to have it, that he had told her so before he died, and that she had been waiting for the right moment to give it to me. I held the watch in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the cool metal against my palm, and I couldn't speak. I just nodded, blinking back tears, and carefully fastened around my wrist. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me, and when I looked at it, I could almost feel my father's presence, his approval, his love. After the presents were opened and the wrapping paper was cleaned up, Mom started on breakfast. The smell of bacon and eggs and fresh coffee filled the house, mixing with the lingering scent of pine from the tree. We ate together at the dining room table, passing plates and talking and laughing, and it felt so normal, so right, that I couldn't imagine why I had ever left. Later that afternoon, people started dropping by. It seemed like half the town had heard I was home, and they all wanted to say hello, to welcome me back, to share a cup of coffee or a piece of pie. Mrs. Henderson came over with a tin of cookies. The Johnsons stopped by with their new baby, a tiny thing with a shock of dark hair and serious eyes. My old friend Marcus showed up, looking older but still with the same easy smile, and we sat on the porch despite the cold, catching up on years of life, finding that the friendship we had built as kids was still there, just waiting to be picked up again. As the day wore on and the visitors came and went, I found myself thinking about the song again, about that moment in the church when we had all been connected by something invisible but powerful. I realized that was what community was what home was. It wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, a sense of belonging, of being known and accepted and loved. That evening after dinner, after the dishes were done and the children were playing quietly with their new toys, I found myself alone with Mom in the kitchen. She was putting away the leftovers, humming softly to herself. I stood in the doorway, watching her, trying to memorize this moment. I told her I had made a decision. I was going to go back to the city, but only to pack up my things and give notice at my job. I was coming home, really coming home. To stay? I didn't know exactly what I would do for work, but I would figure it out. What mattered was being here, being part of this family, this community, this life that I had been missing without even realizing it. She turned to look at me, and her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, the kind of smile that lights up a whole face, a whole room, a whole world. She didn't say anything, just crossed the kitchen and hugged me, holding me tight, and I could feel her heart beating against my chest, steady and strong and full of love. That night, I lay in my old bed, in my old room that Mom had kept exactly as I had left it, and I listened to the sounds of the house settling around me, the creak of floorboards as someone walked down the hall, the soft murmur of voices from the room next door, the distant sound of the furnace kicking on, sending warm air through the vents. These were the sounds of home, the sounds I had been missing, the sound that told me I was safe, I was loved, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, about the years I had spent running away from pain, from grief, from the fear of not being enough. I thought about how that running had only made the pain worse, had only deepened the loneliness, had only reinforced the lie that I was better off alone. I thought about the song we had sung, about how it cracked me open and let the light in, about how sometimes you have to break before you can heal. The next few days passed in a blur of activity and joy. We went sledding on the hill behind the elementary school, the same hill where Emma and I had spent countless winter afternoons as kids. We built a snowman in the front yard, with Sophie directing the operation like a tiny general, insisting that the carrot nose had to be just right and that the stick arms needed to be at the perfect angle. We baked cookies, dozens and dozens of them, filling the house with the smell of sugar and butter and vanilla. On the day after Christmas, Marcus invited me to join him and some other old friends for drinks at the local pub. I almost said no, feeling shy and uncertain, worried that too much time had passed, that we would have nothing to talk about. But Emma encouraged me to go, saying that I needed to start rebuilding my life here, and that meant reconnecting with people. The pub was warm and crowded, filled with the sound of laughter and conversation, and the clink of glasses. I saw familiar faces everywhere I looked, people I had gone to school with, people I had played sports with, people I had lost touch with over the years. They welcomed me back with open arms, buying me drinks, asking about my life, sharing stories about their own lives, their jobs, their families, their dreams. I talked to Sarah, who had been my lab partner in chemistry, and was now a nurse at the local hospital. I talked to James, who had been the star quarterback and was now coaching the high school football team. I talked to Lisa, who had been the quiet girl who sat in the back of class, and was now running her own successful bakery. Each conversation was a thread, weaving me back into the fabric of this community, reminding me that I had a place here, that I had always had a place here, even when I had convinced myself otherwise. As the evening wore on and the drinks flowed, someone suggested we sing some Christmas carols, and before I knew it, we were all gathered around the old piano in the corner, belting out songs at the top of our lungs. We sang Jingle Bells and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, laughing at how off-key we all were, not caring because it was fun and we were together, and that was all that mattered. Then someone requested O Holy Night, and the mood shifted, became more serious, more reverent. We sang it together, our voices blending and rising, and I was transported back to that moment in the church, to that feeling of connection and transcendence and grace. When we finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Sarah said softly that she had been at the church service too, that she had cried to the whole song, that it had been one of the most powerful experiences of her life. Others nodded, sharing their own experiences, their own emotions, and I realized that what I had felt that night wasn't unique to me. We had all been touched by something, all been changed in some small way. The song had been a catalyst, breaking down the walls we had built around ourselves, allowing us to be vulnerable and open and real with each other. Marcus said that he thought that was what Christmas was really about, not the presents or the decorations or the food, but the moments of connection, the times when we let ourselves be fully present with each other, when we allow ourselves to feel deeply and love freely. He said that in our busy, distracted world, those moments were rare and precious, and we should hold on to them, cherish them, let them change us. I walked home that night through the quiet streets, my breath coming out in white puffs, my footsteps crunching in the snow. The stars were out again, brilliant and countless, and I stopped in the middle of the street to look up at them, feeling small and insignificant, and yet somehow part of something vast and beautiful and eternal. I thought about all the people I had reconnected with, all the conversations I'd had, all the laughter and tears and memories shared. I thought about how easy it had been to slip back into these relationships, how natural it had felt, as if no time had passed at all. I thought about how much I had missed by staying away, how many moments of joy and connection and love I had sacrificed in pursuit of something that had turned out to be empty and meaningless. But I also thought about how it wasn't too late, how I was here now, how I had been given a second chance. I thought about the song, about how it had opened something inside me, about how it had reminded me of what really mattered. I thought about my father, about how he would have been proud of me for coming home, for choosing love over fear, for choosing connection over isolation. The week between Christmas and New Year passed quickly, filled with more visits, more meals, more conversations. I helped Michael in his workshop, learning the basics of carpentry, finding satisfaction in working with my hands, in creating something tangible and real. I spent time with Sophie and Jack, reading them stories, playing games, building elaborate structures out of blocks that they would knock down with gleeful shrieks of laughter. I went through my old things in the attic, boxes and boxes of memories that Mom had saved. My old baseball glove, stiff and cracked with age. My high school yearbooks, filled with signatures and inside jokes that made me smile. My collection of comic books, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Each item was a piece of my past, a reminder of who I had been, and as I sorted through them, I felt like I was reclaiming parts of myself that I had lost or forgotten. On New Year's Eve, the whole town gathered in the square for a celebration. There was a stage set up with a local band playing and food trucks selling hot chocolate and roasted chestnuts and warm pretzels. Children ran around with sparklers, drawing patterns in the air, their laughter ringing out clear and bright. Couples danced in the street, holding each other close, swaying to the music. I stood with my family, with Emma and Michael and the kids, with Mom, and with Marcus and Sarah and all the other friends I had reconnected with. We counted down the final second of the year together, our voices joining in a chorus that grew louder and more excited as we approached midnight. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in brilliant colors that reflected off the snow. People hugged and kissed and wished each other well, and I found myself embraced by person after person, each one welcoming me home, each one expressing their happiness that I was back. When the fireworks ended and the crowd began to disperse, we walked home together, tired but happy, our faces flushed from the cold and the excitement. Sophie had fallen asleep on Michael's shoulder, and Jack was dragging his feet, fighting to stay awake. Mom linked her arm through mine, and we walked in comfortable silence, listening to the crunch of our footsteps in the snow, watching our breath form clouds in the cold air. Back at the house, we made one final pie of hot chocolate and sat around the Christmas tree, which was looking a bit droopy now, its needles starting to fall. We talked about the year that had just ended and the year that was beginning. Emma shared her hopes for her students, for Sophie and Jack, for her family. Michael talked about expanding his business, about taking on more apprentices, about giving back to the community that had supported him. Mom said that her only wish was for her family to be happy and healthy, and she looked at me as she said it, her eyes shining with tears and joy. I told him about my plans to move back, about how I was going to look for work here, maybe start my own consulting business, something that would allow me to use my skills, but also give me the flexibility to be present, to be part of their lives in a real and meaningful way. They were all supportive, offering suggestions and connections, talking about people I should meet, opportunities one should explore. But more than that, they were just happy, genuinely happy, that I was coming home. It was a gift, that happiness, that acceptance, and I felt unworthy of it and grateful for it in equal measure. As the clock approached 2 in the morning, we finally admitted defeat and headed to bed. I climbed the stairs to my old room, my body tired but my heart full, and I stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the snow-covered street, at the houses with their lights off, at the peaceful, sleeping town. I thought about the song again, about how it had started everything, about how one moment of vulnerability and connection had changed the entire trajectory of my life. I thought about how we had all cried together, strangers and friends and family, united by something bigger than ourselves. I thought about how those tears have been cleansing, healing, transformative. I realized that tears weren't a sign of weakness, as I had always believed. They were a sign of being human, of being alive, of being willing to feel deeply and love fully. They were a release, a letting go of all the pain and fear and regret that we carry around with us. They were a baptism, washing us clean, making us new. The next morning, I woke early and went downstairs to find Mom already in the kitchen, making coffee. She smiled when she saw me and poured me a cup, and we sat together at the kitchen table, watching the sun rise through the window, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. She told me about the years after Dad died, about how hard it had been, how lost she felt. She said that there were days when she didn't think she could go on, when the grief was so overwhelming it felt like drowning. But she had kept going one day at a time, one foot in front of the other, because that was what you did. You kept going. She said that Emma had been her rock, that having the grandchildren around had given her a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to smile, a reason to hope. She said that she had prayed for me every single day, asking God to watch over me, to guide me, to bring me home when I was ready. I asked her if she was angry with me for staying away, and she shook her head. She said that she had been hurt, yes, and worried, but never angry. She said that she understood that everyone has their own journey, their own path to walk, and that sometimes that path takes you away from home before it brings you back. She said that what mattered was that I was here now, that I had found my way back, and that was enough. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee, watching the world wake up outside the window. A cardinal landed on the bird feeder, its red feathers brilliant against the white snow. A car drove slowly down the street, its tires crunching in the snow. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, marking the hour. I told her about the moment in the church, about how the song had broken something open inside me, about how I had felt my father's presence so strongly it was as if he was standing right beside me. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and said that she had felt it too, that she felt him often, especially during the holidays, especially when the family was all together. She said that she believed he was still with us, in some way, watching over us, guiding us, loving us. She said that death wasn't an ending but a transformation, that the people we love never really leave us. They just change form, becoming part of the air we breathe, the light that surrounds us, the love that sustains us. I wanted to believe that Dad was still somehow present, still somehow part of our lives. And sitting there in the quiet kitchen with my mother, watching the sun rise on a new year, I found that I could believe it. I could feel him in the warmth of the coffee cup in my hands, in the soft light filtering through the window, in the love that filled this house, this family, this moment. The days that followed were busy with preparations for my move back home. I made phone calls to my landlord, to my boss, to the few friends I had in the city. I arranged for movers, for storage, for all the practical details that come with uprooting your life. But even as I dealt with the logistics, I felt a sense of peace, a certainty that I was doing the right thing. Emma helped me look for a place to live, and we found a small apartment above the bookstore on Main Street. It was cozy and bright, with big windows that looked out over the town square, and it felt right the moment I walked in. The owner, Mrs. Chun, remembered me from when I was a kid and gave me a good deal on the rent, saying she was happy to have me back in town. I started reaching out to potential clients, using my network in the city to build a consulting business that would allow me to work remotely while still being present in the community. The response was better than I had hoped, and within a few weeks, I had enough work lined up to feel confident about my decision. But more than the work, more than the apartment, more than any of the practical considerations, what made me certain I was doing the right thing was the feeling I had every morning when I woke up. It was a feeling of belonging, of being exactly where I was supposed to be, of being home in the deepest sense of the word. I spent time with Sophie and Jack, becoming a real presence in their lives. I taught Sophie how to ride a bike without training wheels, running alongside her, holding the seat, then letting go and watching her wobble and then steady, her face breaking into a huge smile when she realized she was doing it on her own. I built a fort with Jack out of blankets and pillows, and we spent an entire afternoon inside it, reading stories and eating cookies and pretending we were explorers in a distant land. I helped Mom with projects around the house, fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom, painting the guest room, cleaning out the gutters. These were small things, mundane things, but they felt important, meaningful. They were ways of showing love, of being present, of contributing to the life of this family. I reconnected with more old friends, joining a weekly basketball game at the community center, attending a book club that met at the library, volunteering at the food bank. Each activity was another thread, weaving me more deeply into the fabric of the community, giving me a sense of purpose and connection that I had been missing for so long. One evening in late January, I found myself back at the church for a community potluck. The same church where we had sung that song on Christmas Eve, where everything had changed. I walked in carrying a casserole Mom had made, and I was immediately surrounded by people, welcomed with hugs and smiles and genuine warmth. We ate together at long tables set up in the fellowship hall, passing dishes back and forth, talking and laughing, sharing stories and jokes and news. It was loud and chaotic and wonderful, and I felt a sense of belonging that was so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. After dinner, someone suggested we sing some songs, and the pastor brought out her guitar. We sang hymns and folk songs and pop songs, our voices blending together in harmonies that were sometimes beautiful and sometimes comically off-key, but always joyful, always full of life. Then someone requested "O Holy Night," and the room fell silent. The pastor strummed the opening chords, and we all began to sing, our voices soft at first, then growing stronger, more confident. O holy night! The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. I looked around the room and saw tears on many faces, saw people holding hands, saw the same sense of connection and transcendence that I had felt on Christmas Eve. When we reached the chorus, "Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices," I felt that same breaking open, that same release of emotion and pain and love. I sang with everything I had, pouring my heart into the words, and I felt my Father's presence again, felt his love surrounding me, supporting me, encouraging me. As the final notes faded away, we all stood in silence for a moment, connected by something invisible but undeniable. Then, slowly, people began to embrace, to wipe away tears, to smile through their emotion. The pastor said softly that this song had become something special for our community, that it had touched something deep in all of us, that it had reminded us of what really mattered. She said that in a world that often feels divided and disconnected, moments like this were precious, were sacred. She said that when we sing together, when we cry together, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open with each other, we create something beautiful, something that transcends our individual selves and connects us to something larger, something divine. I walked home that night feeling full, feeling grateful, feeling blessed. The air was cold and crisp, and my breath came out in white clouds, and the stars overhead were brilliant and countless. I thought about how far I had come in just a few short weeks, how much had changed, how much I had changed. I thought about the person I had been when I arrived on that cold December evening, carrying my suitcase, unsure of my welcome, burdened by guilt and regret. I thought about how the song had cracked me open, how the tears had washed me clean, how the love of my family and community had healed me. I realized that coming home wasn't about going backward, wasn't about giving up or admitting defeat. It was about moving forward, about choosing what really mattered, about building a life based on connection and love rather than achievement and success. It was about being brave enough to be vulnerable, to admit that I needed people, that I couldn't do it alone, that I was better, stronger, more whole when I was part of something larger than myself. By the time spring arrived, I was fully settled into my new life. My business was thriving, my apartment felt like home, and I had established routines and rhythms that felt natural and right. I had Sunday dinners with Mom and Emma's family. I had coffee every morning at the bakery, where I would chat with whoever happened to be there. I had my basketball games and my book club and my volunteer work. But more than any of that, I had relationships, real and deep and meaningful. I knew my neighbors, and they knew me. I was part of Sophie and Jack's lives, not just a distant uncle they saw once a year, but someone who was there for school plays and soccer games and bedtime stories. I was there for Mom when she needed help, when she was lonely, when she just wanted company. I started dating Sarah, the nurse I had reconnected with at the pub. It happened slowly, naturally, growing out of friendship into something more. We would meet for coffee, for walks, for dinners, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I had never opened up to anyone. I told her about my fears and my regrets, about my struggles and my hopes, and she listened without judgment, without trying to fix me, just accepting me as I was. She told me about her own journey, about how she had almost left town after nursing school, how she had been offered a job at a big hospital in the city, how she had been tempted by the prestige and the salary. But in the end, she had chosen to stay, to work at the small local hospital, to be part of this community. She said it was the best decision she had ever made, that she had never regretted it for a moment. We talked about the song, about that night in the church, about how it had affected both of us. She said that she'd been going through a difficult time, dealing with burnout and questioning her career choice, wondering if she had made a mistake by staying in such a small town. But singing that song, feeling that connection with everyone around her, had reminded her of why she had chosen this life, had renewed her sense of purpose and meaning. As the months passed and our relationship deepened, I found myself thinking about the future in ways I never had before. Not in terms of career goals or financial targets, but in terms of building a life with someone, creating a family, putting down roots so deep they could never be pulled up. When Christmas came around again, I felt a mixture of anticipation and nostalgia. I wondered if the magic of the previous year could be recaptured, if that moment in the church could be recreated, or if it had been a one-time thing, a perfect storm of circumstances and emotions that could never be repeated. The town looked much the same as it had the year before, with wreaths on the lampposts and lights strung across the streets, and the smell of cinnamon and wood smoke in the air. But I was different. I was no longer the lost, lonely person who had arrived with a suitcase and a heart full of regret. I was home, truly home, with roots and relationships and a life that felt full and meaningful. On Christmas Eve, we all went to the midnight service again. Sarah came with us this time, holding my hand as we walked through the snowy streets, and I felt a sense of completeness, of rightness, that made my chest ache with happiness. The church was packed, even more crowded than the year before, and we squeezed into a pew near the back. The service followed the same pattern as the previous year, with the lighting of the candles and the singing of hymns and the pastor's message about coming home. But this year, I listened with different ears, heard different meanings in the familiar words. This year, I wasn't coming home, I was home, and that made all the difference. When the time came for the carol sing, I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the air, in the way people shifted in their seats, in the anticipation that seemed to fill the church. And sure enough, someone called out for O Holy Night, and the entire congregation seemed to take a collective breath. The organist began to play, and we all began to sing, our voices joining together in that familiar, powerful melody. O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. But this year, I wasn't crying from pain or regret or grief. I was crying from joy, from gratitude, from the overwhelming sense of being exactly where I was supposed to be, surrounded by people I loved, part of something beautiful and sacred and eternal. Sarah squeezed my hand, and I looked over to see tears streaming down her face too. But she was smiling, that radiant smile that lit up her whole face. On my other side, Mom was singing with her eyes closed, her face peaceful and serene, and I knew she was thinking of Dad, feeling his presence, knowing that he was with us in spirit if not in body. Fall on your knees. Oh, hear the angel voices. We all sang together, our voices rising and swelling, filling the church with sound and emotion and love. O night divine, O night when Christ was born, O night divine, O night divine. The words washed over me, through me, and I felt cleansed, renewed, reborn. When the song ended, there was that same moment of silence, that same sense of connection and transcendence. Then people began to embrace, to share their joy and their tears, to celebrate this moment of unity and love. I hugged Sarah, then Mom, then Emma, then Michael, then people I barely knew but who felt like family in that moment. As we filed out of the church into the cold December night, I looked up at the stars, brilliant and countless against the black sky, and I felt my father's presence so strongly it was as if he was walking beside me. I could almost hear his voice, deep and warm and full of love, telling me he was proud of me, that he was happy I had found my way home, that he had always known I would. We walked home through the snowy streets, a group of us together, talking and laughing and singing snatches of carols. The world felt magical, transformed, as if the song had cast a spell over everything, making it more vivid, more real, more beautiful. The lights on the houses seemed to glow brighter. The snow seemed to sparkle more brilliantly. The air seemed to smell sweeter. Back at home, we gathered around the Christmas tree with our hot chocolate, continuing the tradition, and I realized that this was what life was about. Not the big moments, not the achievements or the accolades, but these small, ordinary moments of connection and love. Sitting with your family, drinking hot chocolate, talking about nothing and everything, feeling safe and loved and accepted. Sophie climbed into my lap, her small body warm and heavy, and she asked me to tell her a story. I thought for a moment, then began to tell her about a man who had lost his way, who had spent years wandering in the wilderness, searching for something he couldn't name. I told her about how he finally found his way home, guided by a song and the love of his family, and how he learned that home wasn't just a place, but a feeling, a sense of belonging, a knowledge that you are loved and accepted exactly as you are. She listened with wide eyes, her head resting against my chest, and when I finished, she said softly that she was glad the man found his way home. I hugged her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the steady beat of her heart, and I thought about how lucky I was to be here, to be part of her life, to have this moment. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood at the window of my old room, looking out at the sleeping town, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the pain and the loss and the years of running away. I thought about the song that had broken me open and the tears that had washed me clean. I thought about the love that had healed me and the community that had welcomed me back. I thought about how one moment can change everything, how one song can crack open your heart and let the light in. I thought about how we are all connected, all part of something larger than ourselves, all threads in a tapestry that is being woven by hands we cannot see. I thought about my father, about how much I missed him, but also about how I could feel him in everything around me, in the love of my family, in the warmth of this house, in the traditions we kept, in the values he had taught me. He wasn't gone, not really. He lived on in us, in the way we loved each other, in the way we showed up for each other, in the way we created moments of connection and joy. And I thought about the future, about the life I was building here, about Sarah and the possibility of marriage and children of my own someday. I thought about growing old in this town, about watching Sophie and Jack grow up, about being there for all the important moments and the ordinary ones too. I thought about becoming the kind of person my father had been, someone who showed up, who loved deeply, who made a difference in the lives of the people around him. The watch on my wrist, my father's watch, caught the moonlight and gleamed softly. I touched it gently, feeling the cool metal, feeling the connection to my past and my future all at once. Time was precious. I had learned that. Time with the people you love. Time to be present. Time to really live instead of just existing. I made a silent promise to myself and to my father that I would not waste any more time. I would show up. I would be present. I would love deeply and freely and without reservation. I would allow myself to be vulnerable, to cry when I needed to cry, to laugh when I felt joy, to feel everything fully and completely. I would sing, even when my voice was off key. I would dance, Even when I didn't know the steps, I would embrace the messiness and the beauty of life, the joy and the sorrow, the laughter and the tears, because that was what it meant to be alive, to be human, to be part of this incredible, heartbreaking, beautiful world. As I finally climbed into bed, exhausted but content, I could hear the house settling around me. Those familiar creaks and sighs had become the soundtrack of my life. I could hear Mom moving around in her room, getting ready for bed. I could hear the wind outside, gentle and soft, rustling the branches of the old oak tree in the front yard. And in my mind, I could hear the song, that beautiful, powerful song that had changed everything. Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. The melody played in my head as I drifted off to sleep, and I dreamed of singing, of voices raised together in harmony, of tears and laughter and love, of coming home. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by the rhythms of small-town life and the deep satisfaction of being rooted in a place and a community. I married Sarah in a simple ceremony at the church, with the whole town in attendance, and we sang O Holy Night as part of the service, because it had become our song, the song that had brought us both home in different ways. We bought a house just a few blocks from Mom, a fixer-upper that we slowly renovated together, learning as we went, making mistakes and laughing about them, creating a home that was uniquely ours. We had children, 2 daughters who filled our lives with chaos and joy and love beyond measure. We named the first one Grace, after the Grace that brought me home, and the second one Hope, because that was what the future held. I watched Sophie and Jack grow up, going from small children to teenagers to young adults. I was there for their graduations, their first jobs, their heartbreaks and triumphs. I became the uncle who showed up, who remembered birthdays, who offered advice when asked and support always. Mom grew older, more fragile, but she remained the center of our family, the one who held us all together. We had Sunday dinners at her house every week without fail, gathering around the same table where I had sat that first night home, passing dishes and sharing stories and laughing until our sides hurt. My business grew and evolved, but I kept it small, kept it manageable, because I had learned that success wasn't measured in dollars or clients, but in time, in the freedom to be present for the people I loved, to coach my daughter's soccer teams, to have lunch with my wife, to help Mom with her grocery shopping. Every Christmas Eve, we went to the midnight service, and every year we sang O Holy Night, and every year there were tears. It became a tradition, something the whole community looked forward to, this moment of collective vulnerability and connection. New people would come to town and experience it for the first time, and they would be transformed by it. Just as I had been, people would tell me their stories about how the song had affected them, about how it had helped them through difficult times, about how it had reminded them of what really mattered. A woman who had lost her husband told me that singing had helped her feel connected to him still. A man who had been estranged from his family told me that it had given him the courage to reach out and reconcile. A teenager struggling with depression told me that it had reminded her that she wasn't alone, that she was part of something larger and more beautiful than her pain. I realized that the song had become more than just a carol, more than just a tradition. It had become a touchstone, a reminder, a call to come home to ourselves, to each other, to what really matters. It was a moment each year when we all stopped pretending, stopped performing, stopped hiding behind our masks and our defenses, and allowed ourselves to be real, to be vulnerable, to be human. And every year, as I sang those familiar words, as I felt the tears streaming down my face, as I held the hands of the people I loved, I gave thanks. Thanks for the journey that had brought me home. Thanks for the pain that had cracked me open. Thanks for the love that had healed me. Thanks for the song that had changed everything. One Christmas Eve, many years after that first transformative night, I stood in the church with my family around me. Sarah on one side, our daughters on the other, Mom in the pew behind us with Emma and her family. The church was packed as always, filled with familiar faces and new ones, with people I had known all my life and people I had just met. The candles were lit, passing from person to person, creating that magical glow that made everything feel sacred and special. The pastor, the same young woman who had been there that first year, now older and wiser, but still with that same gentle spirit, announced that we would sing O Holy Night. The organist began to play, and we all began to sing, our voices joining together in that familiar, powerful melody. O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. I looked around at the faces surrounding me, at the tears and the smiles, at the love and the connection, and I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. My daughters were singing, their young voices clear and strong, and I thought about how they had grown up with this tradition, how it was woven into the fabric of their lives, how they would carry it forward into their own futures. Sarah was singing beside me, her hand in mine, and I thought about all the years we had shared, all the joys and sorrows, all the ordinary moments that had added up to an extraordinary life. Mom was singing behind me, her voice wavering now with age but still full of emotion, and I thought about how blessed I was to still have her, to have had all these years with her, to have been able to show her through my presence and my love that I had learned what really mattered. Fall on your knees. Oh, hear the angel voices. We all sang together, our voices rising and swelling, filling the church with sound and emotion and love. O night divine, O night when Christ was born, O night divine, O night divine. The words washed over me, through me, and I felt that same sense of transcendence, of connection, of being part of something eternal and beautiful and true. As the final notes faded away, as we all stood in that moment of silence before the embracing began, I closed my eyes and sent up a prayer of thanks. Thanks for this life, for this family, for this community, for this moment. Thanks for the journey that had brought me here, for the pain that had taught me, for the love that had saved me. Thanks for the unexpected song we had all sung together, and for the tears that had followed, tears that had washed us clean and made us new, tears that had connected us to each other and to something larger than ourselves, tears that had reminded us that we are all human, all vulnerable, all in need of love and grace and forgiveness. And as I opened my eyes and looked around at the faces of the people I loved, at the community that had welcomed me home and held me close, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I was home, truly home, not just in a physical place, but in my heart, in my soul, in the deepest part of my being. The song had brought me home, but it was love that had kept me here. Love for my family, love for my community, love for this life I had built, love for the person I had become, and that love, I knew, would sustain me through whatever came next, through the joys and the sorrows, through the laughter and the tears, through all the days of my life. As we filed out of the church into the cold December night, as the snow began to fall softly from the dark sky, as the stars blazed overhead in their countless millions, I took Sarah's hand and smiled. Our daughters ran ahead, laughing and catching snowflakes on their tongues, and Mom walked beside Emma, their arms linked, their heads close together. We walked home through the snowy streets, this family I loved more than life itself, and I thought about how far I had come, how much I had learned, how grateful I was for every moment, every experience, every person who had shaped me into who I was today. And in my mind, I could hear the song still playing, that beautiful, powerful song that had changed everything, that had brought me home, that had taught me what really mattered. O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. The melody played in my heart as we walked, as the snow fell around us, as the world was transformed into something magical and sacred and perfect. I thought about my father, about how he would have loved this moment, how he would have been walking beside us, singing off key, making us all laugh. And I realized that he was here, in a way, in the love we shared, in the traditions we kept, in the values we lived by. He was here in the watch on my wrist, in the memories we cherished, in the stories we told our children about him. Death had taken his body, but it could not take his love, could not take his influence, could not take the mark he had left on all of us. He lived on in us, and he would live on in our children and in their children, passed down to the generations like a precious gift, like a song that never ends. As we reached home and climbed the steps of the porch, as the warm light spilled out from the windows and the smell of cinnamon and pine drifted out to greet us, I paused for a moment and looked back at the snowy street, at the houses with their glowing windows, at the peaceful, sleeping town. This was home. This was where I belonged. This was where my story had led me, through all the twists and turns, through all the pain and joy, through all the running away and coming back. This was where I was meant to be, surrounded by love, rooted in community, connected to something larger and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. And as I turned to go inside, to join my family in the warmth and light, to continue the traditions that bound us together, to create new memories that would sustain us through the years to come, I whisper a final thank you to the universe, to God, to whatever force had guided me home. Thank you for the song. Thank you for the tears. Thank you for the love. Thank you for this life, this family, this moment. Thank you for bringing me home. Inside, the house was warm and bright, filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, and the clatter of dishes as we prepared hot chocolate and cookies. The Christmas tree glowed in the corner, its lights twinkling softly, its ornaments catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking the passage of time, reminding us that each moment was precious. Each moment was a gift. We gathered in the living room, just as we had done that first Christmas Eve so many years ago, and we shared our favorite memories from the year. Our daughters talked about their school plays and their soccer games and the time they had built a snow fort so big they could stand up inside it. Sarah talked about a patient she had helped, a young mother who had been so grateful for her care that she had cried and hugged her and told her she was an angel. Emma talked about one of her students, a quiet boy who had struggled all year and then suddenly, miraculously, had started to thrive, reading above grade level and raising his hand in class and smiling more. Michael talked about finishing a custom dining table for a couple celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, how they had cried when they saw it, how they had told him it was the most beautiful thing they had ever owned. Mom talked about her garden, about how the roses had bloomed more abundantly than ever before, about how she had spent hours sitting among them, feeling the sun on her face, feeling grateful for another year, another season, another chance to witness the beauty of the world. And I talked about this moment, about sitting here with all of them, about feeling so full of love and gratitude that I thought my heart might burst. I talked about how lucky I was, how blessed, how grateful for every single person in this room, for every moment we had shared, for every memory we had created together. As the clock struck 2 a.m, as it had done that first Christmas Eve, we all reluctantly admitted that it was time for bed. The children were already asleep, curled up on the couch, their faces peaceful and innocent. We carried them carefully to their beds, tucking them in, kissing their foreheads, whispering that we loved them. Sarah and I walked home to the quiet streets, hand in hand, our footsteps crunching in the fresh snow. The sky had cleared, and the stars were out, brilliant and countless, and we stopped in the middle of the street to look up at them, just as I had done so many years ago. She asked me what I was thinking, and I told her I was thinking about how one moment can change everything, how one song can crack open your heart and let the light in, how one decision to come home can transform your entire life. I told her I was thinking about how grateful I was for that moment, for that song, for that decision. She squeezed my hand and said she was grateful, too, that my coming home had changed her life as well, had given her a partner, a family, a love she had never thought she would find. She said that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, when we are broken and vulnerable and open to grace. We stood there for a long time, looking up at the stars, feeling the cold air on our faces, feeling connected to each other and to the universe, and to something we couldn't name but could feel in every cell of our bodies. And then we walked the rest of the way home, to our house, to our life, to the future we were building together one day at a time. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sarah, listening to her breathing, feeling the warmth of her body next to mine, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the pain and the loss and the years of running away. I thought about the song that had broken me open and the tears that had washed me clean. I thought about the love that had healed me and the community that had welcomed me back. And I thought about how all of it, every single moment, every experience, every choice had been necessary. The pain had been necessary to crack me open. The running had been necessary to teach me what I was running from. The loneliness had been necessary to show me what I was missing. The song had been necessary to bring me home. It had all been part of the journey, part of the story, part of the process of becoming who I was meant to be. And I wouldn't change any of it, not a single moment, because it had all led me here, to this bed, to this woman, to this life, to this profound sense of peace and belonging and love. As I drifted off to sleep, I could hear the song playing in my mind one more time, that beautiful, powerful song that had changed everything. O holy night! The stars are brightly shining. It is a night of our dear Savior's birth. The melody carried me into dreams, dreams of singing, of voices raised together in harmony, of tears and laughter and love, of coming home. And in my dreams, I saw my father, young and healthy and strong, and he was smiling at me with that smile I remembered so well, full of love and pride and joy. He didn't say anything, didn't need to, because I could feel what he wanted me to know, that he was proud of me, that he loved me, that he had always been with me, even when I couldn't feel his presence, even when I thought I was alone. He was there in every act of love, in every moment of connection, in every choice to show up and be present and give of myself. He was there in the watch on my wrist, in the values he had taught me, in the example he had set. He was there in the way I loved my wife, in the way I raised my daughters, in the way I showed up for my family and my community. And he would always be there, as long as I remembered what he had taught me, as long as I lived by the values he had instilled in me, as long as I chose love over fear, connection over isolation, presence over absence. He would live on in me and through me and in all the lives I touched, rippling out like waves on a pond, touching shores I would never see, making a difference I would never fully know. That was a legacy he had left me, not money or possessions, but something far more valuable. The knowledge that love is what matters, that connection is what sustains us, that being present is the greatest gift we can give, the understanding that we are all connected, all part of something larger than ourselves, all threads of a tapestry that is being woven by hands we cannot see. And that was a legacy I would leave to my daughters, and they would leave to their children, and on through the generations. Not wealth or fame or achievement, but love. Deep, abiding, unconditional love. The kind of love that shows up, that stays present, that forgives and accepts and nurtures. The kind of love that is expressed not in grand gestures, but in small, daily acts of kindness and care. The kind of love that is sung in a church on Christmas Eve, when voices join together in harmony, and tears stream down faces, and hearts crack open to let the light in. The kind of love that brings you home, that heals your wounds, that makes you whole. The kind of love that is the answer to every question, the solution to every problem, the meaning of life itself. As the dream faded and I sank deeper into sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace, of completion, of rightness. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, loving exactly who I was supposed to love. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought me here, to this moment, to this life, to this love, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The morning came softly, with pale winter light filtering through the curtains and the sound of birds singing outside the window. I woke slowly, reluctantly leaving the warmth of sleep and dreams, and for a moment I just lay there, feeling Sarah's warmth beside me, listening to the sounds of the house waking up around me. I could hear our daughters in their room, talking in hushed voices, probably planning to sneak downstairs and see what Santa had brought. I could hear the furnace kicking on, sending warm air through the vents. I could hear the distant sound of church bells, calling people to Christmas morning service. I got up and pulled on my robe, and Sarah stirred beside me, opening her eyes and smiling that sleepy smile I loved so much. "Merry Christmas," she whispered, and I leaned down to kiss her, tasting sleep and love and home. "Merry Christmas," I whispered back, and then we heard the thunder of small feet on the stairs and the excited squeals of children discovering presents under the tree. We went downstairs to join them, to watch their faces light up with joy, to share in their excitement and wonder. And as I sat there in my living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and ribbons and the people I loved most in the world, I felt that same overwhelming sense of gratitude that had become so familiar to me since coming home. Gratitude for this life, for this family, for this moment. Gratitude for the journey that had brought me here, for the pain that had taught me, for the love that had saved me. Gratitude for the song that had changed everything, for the tears that had washed me clean, for the grace that had brought me home. Later that day, we would go to Mom's house for Christmas dinner, and we would gather around a table with Emma and Michael and Sophie and Jack, and we would eat too much and laugh too loud, and tell the same stories we told every year. We would watch the children play with their new toys, and we would help Mom clean up the kitchen. And we would sit around a Christmas tree and feel grateful for another year together, another Christmas, another chance to love each other. But for now, in this moment, I just sat with my own small family, watching my daughters play, holding Sarah's hand, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on my face. And I thought about how this was what happiness looked like, not some grand achievement or dramatic moment, but this ordinary, extraordinary moment of being present with the people you love, of feeling grateful for what you have, of knowing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The song played in my mind again, as it so often did, that beautiful melody that had become the soundtrack of my life. Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining, and I realized that every night was holy, every moment was sacred, every breath was a gift. We just had to pay attention, had to be present, had to open our hearts and let the light in. That was what the song had taught me, what that night in the church had shown me, that we are all connected, all part of something larger and more beautiful than we can comprehend. That love is what matters, what sustains us, what gives our lives meaning. That home is not just a place but a feeling, a sense of belonging, a knowledge that you are loved and accepted exactly as you are. And that tears are not something to be ashamed of, but something to be embraced. They are the language of the soul, the expression of our deepest emotions, the release of everything we hold inside. They connect us to each other, remind us of our shared humanity, wash us clean, and make us new. The unexpected song we had all sung together, and the tears that followed, had changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. They had brought me home, healed my wounds, taught me what really mattered. They had given me a family, a community, a life full of love and meaning and purpose. And every year, when we gathered in that church on Christmas Eve and sang that song together, when the tears streamed down our faces and our voices rose in harmony, I was reminded of all of this. I was reminded of where I had been and where I was now. I was reminded of what I had lost and what I had found. I was reminded of the journey that had brought me home and the love that had kept me here. It was a gift, that song, that moment, that tradition, a gift that kept on giving year after year, reminding us of what really mattered, connecting us to each other and to something larger than ourselves, cracking us open and letting the light in. And as I sat there on that Christmas morning, surrounded by love and laughter and the simple joy of being together, I knew that I would carry that song with me for the rest of my life. It would be there in the quiet moments, in the difficult times, in the celebrations and the sorrows. It would remind me of who I was, where I came from, what I valued most. It would remind me to be present, to love deeply, to allow myself to be vulnerable and open and real. It would remind me that tears are not weakness but strength, that connection is not dependence but freedom, that home is not a place you go to, but a feeling you carry inside you wherever you are. And someday when my daughters were grown and had families of their own, when they gathered in that same church on Christmas Eve and sang that same song, they would think of me just as I thought of my father. They would feel my presence just as I felt his. They would carry my love with them just as I carried his. And the song would continue, passed down to the generations, connecting us all across time and space, reminding us that we are never alone, that we are always loved, that we always have a home to return to, not just in a physical place, but in the hearts of those who love us, in the traditions we keep, in the values we live by. That was the true meaning of Christmas. I realized, not the presents or the decorations or the food, but this connection, this love, this sense of belonging to something larger than ourselves. This knowledge that we are all part one family, one community, one human race, all struggling and striving and searching for the same things. Love, acceptance, meaning purpose, home. And when we come together, when we sing together, when we cry together, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and open and real with each other, we create something beautiful, something sacred, something that transcends our individual selves and connects us to the divine. That was what had happened that night in the church. What happened every year when we sang that song. We created a moment of grace, a glimpse of heaven, a reminder of what we are capable when we let down our walls and open our hearts and allow love to flow through us and between us and around us. And that, I thought as I watched my daughters play, as I held Sarah's hand, as I prepared to go to Mom's house for Christmas dinner, was the greatest gift of all. Not something you could wrap in paper and tie with a bow, but something you carried in your heart, something you share with others, something that grew and multiplied the more you gave it away. Love, connection, belonging, home. These were the gifts that really mattered, the gifts that lasted, the gifts that changed lives and healed wounds and made the world a better place. These were the gifts I had received when I came home, when I sang that song, when I allowed myself to be cracked open and washed clean and made new. And these were the gifts I would spend the rest of my life giving to others, to my family, to my community, to everyone I met, because that was what life was about, what we were here for, what gave our existence meaning and purpose. Not accumulating wealth or achieving success or building impressive careers, but loving each other, connecting with each other, creating moments of grace and beauty and transcendence together. The song had taught me that. The tears had taught me that. The journey home had taught me that. And I would never forget it. Would carry it with me always. Would let it guide my choices and shape my life and define who I was and who I wanted to be. As we bundled up the girls and prepared to head to Mom's house, as we gathered the presents we had wrapped and the dishes we had prepared, as we stepped out into the cold December air and began the short walk through the snowy streets, I felt a profound sense of peace and contentment. This was my life. This was my family. This was my home. And I was grateful for every single moment of it, for every joy and every sorrow, for every laugh and every tear, for every ordinary day and every special occasion. I was grateful for the journey that had brought me here, for the song that had changed me, for the love that had saved me. And as we walked, I began to hum softly, that familiar melody that had become so much a part of me. Oh, holy night, the stars are brightly shining. Sarah joined in, and then our daughters, their young voices clear and sweet, and we walked to the snowy street singing together, our voices rising into the cold December air, our breath forming clouds that mingled and danced and disappeared. People heard us and smiled, some joining in, some just listening, all of them touched by the simple beauty of a family singing together on Christmas morning. And I realized that this was how the song spread, how the tradition continued, how the love multiplied. One person at a time, one family at a time, one moment at a time. We reached Mom's house, and the door opened before we could knock, and there she was, her face glowing with happiness, her arms open wide to embrace us. Emma and Michael and the kids were already there, and the house was filled with the smells of cooking and the sound of laughter and the warmth of family gathered together. We spent the day eating and talking and playing games and watching the children perform an impromptu Christmas play they had rehearsed in secret. We told stories and shared memories and created new ones. We laughed until our sides hurt and cried a little too, remembering Dad, missing him, but also feeling his presence in everything we did, every word we spoke, every moment we shared. And as the day drew to a close, as the sun set and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as we prepared to head home to our own house and our own beds, I took a moment to stand on the porch and look out at the town I loved, the place I called home. The Christmas lights twinkled on every house, warm and inviting. Smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the scented fires into the cold night air. In the distance, I could hear the church bells ringing, marking the end of Christmas Day. And overhead, the stars blazed in their countless millions, just as they had on that first night when I had arrived home, lost and broken and searching for something I couldn't name. I had found it, that thing I had been searching for. I had found it in a song, in tears, in the love of my family and community. I had found it in coming home, in being present, in allowing myself to be vulnerable and open and real. I had found it in the simple, ordinary moments of life, in the daily act of love and care and connection. And I knew with absolute certainty that I would never lose it again, because it wasn't something outside of me, something I had to search for, or achieve, or earn. It was inside me, part of me, woven into the very fabric of my being. It was in every breath I took, every word I spoke, every choice I made. It was home, not a place, but a feeling, not a destination, but a way of being, not something you arrive at, but something you carry with you always in your heart, in your soul, in the deepest part of your being. And as I turned to go inside, to join my family for one last cup of hot chocolate before heading home. I whispered a final thank you to the night, to the stars, to the universe, to God. Thank you for the unexpected song. We all sang together. Thank you for the tears that followed. Thank you for bringing me home. Thank you for this life, this love, this moment. Thank you for everything.